Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another broadcast of The Weekly with me, Neff. Please subscribe to the channel. Share this video with some family members, friends, and colleagues. I definitely appreciate that support. Let's talk a little bit about the Fantastic Four First Steps. Just got out of the theater, so this is a quick reaction on that film. And it's going to be an in-depth review, but it's not going to be spoiler-filled. So let's get into it with Fantastic Four First Steps. First of all, I want to say that this movie is solid work overall. I'm going to say, and I haven't seen Thunderbolts or anything in Marvel, I'd say since, like, really in theater. I'm really trying to think the last movie I saw from Marvel. Maybe Thor, Love and Thunder, right? So not a good bar, not a high bar, but I'm going to go out and say this film is probably the best film from Marvel Studios since, I want to say, Endgame. Not as good as Infinity War, of course. I think Infinity War is actually better than Endgame. But when you're talking about those films, you're talking about a seriousness and tonality, an ensemble with good balance. The films have narrative. They have a solid villain. And you have a reason to care about those films emotionally. And so I feel like this film is a standout from all of the stuff we've gotten post that time period. And I'd say this film is one of the more serious Marvel films that's ever been created, to be quite honest. There is comic book elements to this film. When I say comic book elements, I mean comic book-ish elements to the film. But there's a lot of serious notes that take it out of the comic book genre to me and make it more of a serious film. Now, like I said, this is a Marvel Studios film, right? This is not Kubrick, it's not Nolan, it's not Spielberg type stuff, but for what it is, I think it's a solid film. I think it's a great interpretation of all four of these characters. That would be Sue Storm, ReedRichards, Ben Grimm as the Thing, and Johnny Storm. Remember, this is the time period piece film, and so I think this film is going to do great with the older generation of audience members and viewers, the baby boomer generation that is, and I also think it's going to make a connection with the younger audience as well. I think this is a very dynamic film from that standpoint. There's a lot of things that I liked about the film. There's some things that could have been worked on, but overall, a good time in the theater, and I definitely recommend this film, and I'd watch this film for a second time in theater, to be quite honest. From all of the negativity that we've heard from some media outlets and personalities, none of that seemed to come to fruition. I never thought it was going to come to fruition. I've had my ticket for Fantastic Four for at least about a month or a month and a half. Whenever those tickets went on sale, that is when I bought my ticket for the Fantastic Four First Step, so I never listened to that. And going into this review, we're kind of just in the beginning of it. I really want people to actually watch movies for themselves and not listen to others that have an agenda to hate on everything. There's a community of people that just hate creativity in general. Your boy Zach really talks about it a lot, and I agree with some things that he says and disagree with other things that he says, but he's kind of pinpointed this audience. It's a specific audience of people that generally just hate everything. They don't see any positivity or optimism in anything. They judge it before they actually see it. And then usually what happens is they pigeonhole themselves and have to capitulate when it doesn't turn out to be as bad as they think it is. I've already seen this with a couple characters in this space of reviewing cinema. Not going to name any names. If you're familiar with the reviewer space, you know who I'm talking about, but I'm seeing a lot of those type of people capitulate and have to admit that this movie is not what they thought it was going to be. Maybe they were reading too much into the rumors and didn't actually know what the film was. So I definitely want everybody to know out there, if you're listening to me, know that you're going to get my honest opinion on film, and it's going to be very intellectual. I'm not here to troll for clicks. I'm not here to hate films for no reason and try to attempt to get cheap attention off of trolling. I think it's pretty silly, and I think it shows a lack of integrity in the space. But let's get back to the review. So no spoilers here for the most part. I think when I'm talking about this film, the elements that I did like about it, let's just get to that, right? So the elements that I like the most about the film and that I think are most important to the film as far as from a viewing standpoint and enjoying the film, I think the pacing was really good for the film, right? It's the backbone of the film. It ran an hour and 55 minutes. It does feel like an hour and 55 minutes, but to me, it doesn't feel overly long. I felt like the action sequences were well placed. I felt like the dialogue was important and it actually moved the plot forward. To me, there wasn't really a lot of stupid dialogue or dialogue that wasn't well placed within the plot and the seams of the film. That's one thing. I'm not going to say the VFX, obviously it is visual, but I'm going to say the set pieces were probably my favorite aspect of the film. there was a lot of set pieces that looked practical. You could actually touch these things, use these things. They had a real use and a real base case, and I think that 60s aesthetic really helped with making it more grounded in that aspect. Also, the costume designs, the costumes had a very practical look, and looks like something that you could actually see people that are, it's funny to say it because comic books are fictional, but something that someone that is realistic as it looks could be wearing in a comic book story or strip for that matter, in better terms. Those are the three things, right? I thought the action sequences were well placed, and I thought they were solid overall. To me, my favorite action sequence in the film was, I want to say, towards the end of the first act between the Fantastic Four, when they actually meet Galactus for the first time. They realize that they're in a conundrum, right? They're trying to figure out what Galactus wants. They're kind of trying to bid with him to save Earth at this point in time. Not to try to give away too many details, but they meet him for the first time, right? And Shalla appears, and there's a whole action sequence between Shalla, Galactus, and the Fantastic Four, and there's a black hole involved. To me, overall, that's probably the best action sequence of the film in totality. There's another solid action sequence, I'd say, in the climax of the film between Sue Storm and Galactus and the Fantastic Four. That is great in general because the stakes are high and the tonality is very serious. Everything is on the table at this point in time to save Earth, and not only save Earth, but to save their son. And so I thought that'd probably be the second best, I guess, action sequence in the film overall. But in between all that, there are solid action pieces. I do like the dialogue between Johnny Storm and Shalla. I thought that was solid as well. A very serious tonality to that. And like I said, the dialogue between them, it really sets the tone in both characters, right? You get to see some, I want to say, character development and building with Shalla. When you're talking about someone that is the Silver Surfer, Shalla this time around, the female version of the Silver Surfer, right? You don't really see too much depth in that character so much unless you are reading a comic book. But as soon as you get the deep dive into who that character is, why they are serving Galactus, and why they are heralding Galactus, it gives them a more human element to the character. You actually get to see who Shalla is before she gets turned into the Silver Surfer. So I really did like that dialogue between her and Johnny Storm. They had a connection really from the beginning that they really blossomed out in the narrative and plot of this film. Very good balance with this film. Every character felt like they were in the right place at the right time. There was a lot of Easter eggs to Dr. Doom. Not going to give any spoilers on him, but there's a lot of Latverian references. And if you know anything about Latveria, you know that's where Dr. Doom is actually from. And so, like I said, not going to go into that. Go watch it for yourself. But there are Easter eggs there if you are familiar with the character. The film also took twists that I didn't think that they were going to take. Referencing Thunderbolts, there was a post-credit scene where I think they set up, oh, I didn't watch Thunderbolts, but based off the stills that I saw, like I said, no real context to it. It looks like, obviously, you have the Fantastic Four spaceship in their universe, right? They leave from Earth 828, right? They're going into the new universe, the future universe, you could say, with the Thunderbolts and the rest of the MCU. And it looks like the Earth is being, I guess, being destroyed in the background. So you would assume that Galactus has won the battle. And so that doesn't necessarily happen in this film, and so I thought that was a nice little twist as well, but definitely want to get some more context on that. Let me know down in the comments if you might know a little more on that, because I didn't watch Thunderbolts, so please fill me in if that may be some misdirection there. But like I said, overall, this film is good work. I thought Julia Garner did a great job as Shalla. With Shalla, it's very tough. With Silver Surfer in general, it's very tough. With the VFX, it's extremely hard to actually make it cut through and make it look good visually. I thought they did the best they could with Marvel Studios, right? This film's about, I want to say, $200 to $225 million. There were some reshoots, but I don't think it was too extensive to blow that budget up to $250 million. I think for a $200 million budget, this film looks pretty good. There was some VFX that was video game-ish, but I'd say for the most part, with the balance of the practical effects, you can forgive it overall. Galactus, absolutely amazing. He actually looks like Galactus for the first time. Ralph Ineson did a great job. The voice is great. The sound is good on this film. In the beginning, it seemed like it was a little low. The mixing was low on it, but it seemed like it actually crept up as the film went on. So I'm glad they corrected that. It could have just been the audience in the theater. The theater was pretty packed where I was at. But overall, I think to encapsulate the Fantastic Four in the 60s era, in the era that they generated from, I thought this film overall is the best Fantastic Four film ever made with ease. Like I said, Galactus, one of my favorite parts of the film. Actually got my hands on a couple Galactus buckets. I'll probably be doing a review on those very soon, so be looking out for that. But yeah, really great to see Galactus be Galactus for the first time, I'd say, in a good interpretation of the character. He's very daunting, very villainous. And like I said, it adds more of a sinister element to the film along with Shalla Ball kind of having a coming to Jesus moment or a moment of reflection and realizing, you know, what is actually right in this situation, finding her own humanity in what's right and wrong. And Norrin Radd had the same thing, turns on Galactus to work with the Fantastic Four. But overall, I think the arcs of all the characters worked very well. The film was well balanced. Like I said, the pacing was good. The aesthetics were on point. The practical effects were solid. VFX needed a little more work in some parts of the film, but I think when you're talking about Marvel for the last couple years, I'd say, let's see, Marvel for the last, I want to say 5 to 8 years, this is definitely one of the better products that they've put out. I give the Fantastic Four First Steps a 79.5 out of 10, just a smidge under Superman. And to be quite honest, I can see people saying that this film is better than Superman. I would not argue against it. One thing about Superman that is very interesting is the fact that it is really comic book-ish. That's what I liked about Superman. To me, quick difference between Superman and Batman, right? So with Batman, yes, he's a comic book character, but Batman is a real person. There is a lot of, I guess, real life crossover that can be interpreted on a relatable level because Batman is a human. He just happens to be a rich human with a lot of gadgets, very smart, intellectual, and has the funds to really fund his operation, right? And so it's a very real story, even if it's someone that hasn't gone through that story, because like I said, Batman is human. He doesn't really have superpowers, right? So with Superman, to me, when I look at Superman, everything that's comic book is comic bookish about Superman, right? Superman is not supposed to be this dark, gritty character. It's supposed to be kind of goofy at times. He's supposed to be naive, a Boy Scout, right? He's not supposed to be a real person because, let's be honest, he's an alien with a cape on and tights in blue and red, right? Nothing realistic about it. Even though Superman deals with humans and he portrays himself as a human person, even looks human, there's really nothing realistic about Superman. And so with that being said, I do like how James Gunn actually made it comic bookish. It's not supposed to be real life. It's not supposed to be like our world. Yes, there's humans involved, but when you're watching Superman, it is a live adaptation of a comic book. With Fantastic Four, there is comic bookish elements, but feels like a film that's been well thought out, and it doesn't feel comic bookish all the time. There is comic bookish moments. I did see those moments, but for the most part, I think there's such a serious tonality in certain aspects of this film that it separates itself from Superman. So the fact that Superman actually made itself what it's supposed to be, that's why I gave it an 8. But Fantastic Four, being a comic book adaptation, it didn't really feel comic bookish all the time. It felt more serious, and I really do like serious films. But if it felt more comic bookish, possibly could have gave it that 8, and I would actually call it a tie overall between the Fantastic Four First Steps and Superman. But I'm going to give it a 79.5 at this point in time. Superman is an 8. We're not really comparing them back to back, even though they're both coming out in July. Both big studio films, right? DC Studios, they have a hard reboot. The MCU, soft reboot. We're going in a different direction here. And I think the Fantastic Four First Steps is a solid rendition and a solid way to get people focused on what's going to be happening with Spider-Man 4 and Doomsday. But more importantly, Doomsday. And they definitely have a message for us at the end of this film regarding Avengers Doomsday. And so stay to watch that. But yes, Fantastic Four and Superman, damn near a tie, to be quite honest. Very good films for two separate reasons. Like I said, if someone says this film is better than Superman, really can't argue about it because I understand why they would say that. Ladies and gents, like I said, the Fantastic Four First Steps gets a 79.5 out of 10. A joy to watch in theater. Go watch it for yourself. I recommend it, like I've said before, and I want to hear your thoughts on the film. What did you think about the Fantastic Four First Steps? Honest thoughts, please. Leave a score or two as well. Also, after you leave your score, if you decide to comment, let me know why you left that score. We can have a great conversation. Like this video, share this video with some family members, friends, and colleagues. I want to hear their thoughts. Also want them to subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell for notifications if you've subscribed to the channel. If you haven't, please do so. And be safe. It's Neff signing off.